Everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Review, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And oddly, it feels like I'm finally getting into some feature length and high quality John Ford prints since the last couple weeks have been a little rough. But we have Kentucky Pride, and my buddy Adam is here to talk about this film and other things here on the show. Adam, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Always a pleasure, Shane.
So we're going to take a dive into a 1925 John Ford film. But before that, if you haven't tuned in to Welcome to the Wasteland before, we have three segments. We have coming attractions for the week of August 11th here in the States, and then feature film Kentucky Pride, and then we have a handful of recommendations to send your way. But Adam, we got August is a weird month in terms of releases because a lot of the times they're kind of just dumping things and being like, well, this has a chance to make some money. But there's a range of some streaming films and a couple wide releases. But what's the film that stood out most to you?
Um, Jules is the one that you just alerted me to the fact, but it's from the looks of it, it's got some pretty good ratings on IMDb so far, and it's just looks like a little quaint, maybe comedic UFO tale. And with all the news that's coming out about UFOs from over there at the moment, then gonna make it a little bit more
Real.
interesting. Yeah, and look, I've always been into that type of genre, I would say. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it interests me. And Ben Kingsley and Jane Curtin as well, who I haven't seen since Third Rock from the Sun. So yeah, looking forward to seeing them actually.
The worst kept secret in the world, aliens.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
aliens don't exist.
That's why it's not. It's weird that it's not all on mainstream media. It's not here in Australia. You've got to see that stuff on like TikTok or Instagram or something. But
It's not making
yeah, it's
national press because it's not people Naruto running around Area 51 because that happened
yeah,
a couple years
yeah,
ago. Oh God,
yeah.
just but this I did get a chance to see this. It is a quaint little UFO story, and Ben Kingsley's great as always. So it's a sweet little film. Hopefully, you'll find a little niche market for people to go check it out. It definitely feels like one of those kinds of films that is leaning towards that like older crowd who haven't 100% committed to going back to movies yet.
Suits me well.
Yeah, there you go. And my pick's completely different. It's the other wide release, which is The Last Voyage of the Demeter. And I have a feel because like I like the director who had done Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and there's one other film that they did. I'm trying to remember, but it's oh, I literally was talking about him. He's the one who Andre Overdahl who did Autopsy of Jane Doe, Troll Hunter. Like he's done some really good movies up to this point, and I'm not like super excited about it, but I do love Liam Cunningham from Game of Thrones, Sir Davos, back on the high seas. And it's one chapter from Dracula, but it's a scary story of a vampire on a boat. So I'm looking now, it's 2 hours. I would have expected something a little leaner, but you know what? Hopefully it's scary. It looks like it has a good cast and it's an interesting idea. So for August, I'll go with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it does seem interesting. And it's a story that's never told in that Dracula. It's always just he gets on the ship and he goes land in London. And
And they're
yeah,
like,
it does
we
sound
found this
interesting.
ship and everybody's dead.
Yeah, that's a story that needs to be told. It's a good idea. That's I like that. It's a good idea.
It's like there's very few times I've seen a film or some kind of production based off of one chapter of a book. I did once
Mm.
see a romantic musical on Broadway based off of one chapter from War and Peace. But I'm hoping this is better. That had Josh Groban,
Hopefully, it's
but
if it's as good as Bad Traveling from David Fincher in Love, Death and Robots. Hopefully, if it's in that vein, then it's going to
oh,
be awesome, right?
that's a high bar to set. That was amazing.
Yeah, it is.
But
Yeah.
those are some coming attractions. Um, Pretty decent for August, but our feature film to talk about this week is Kentucky Pride. And I'm going to give a little background that I have here on the film. It is from 1925, directed by John Ford. The story of a Beaumont racehorse told through the point of view of the horse via intertitles. So that is an interesting little twist that this film has going for it. Some background. They actually had some legendary horses in it. Um, this is archived at the Museum of Modern Art, so that's where they have this like pretty nice pristine print of the film that they have
It,
on YouTube. Which
absolutely,
cannot,
they do.
but yeah, which cannot be said about all of the John Ford movies that I've watched so far on YouTube, going through his filmography. And I just made a note that like this is a really nice print of this movie, and I'm just like, this looks nice. It is starring Henry Bill Walthall, who was in Birth of a Nation. So like he was a pretty big, recognizable actor at the time, and focuses on horse breeding and racing. I guess the Seabiscuit of 80 years prior. But Adam, what were your general thoughts on the film?
Well, just to mirror some of what you were saying, yeah, I was stunned at how great it looked. Because yeah, I watched it on YouTube. It did look phenomenal. I was a little bit taken aback at first because it is truly silent. There's no musical overlay. It's
Yes.
just images, and I'm like, this is just John Ford. He's just filming at the start. He's just filming horses in a paddock. This is kind of stupid. But then as it grew, like I really got into it. Broad thoughts. I'm actually surprised at how much I really liked it, but I also am quite empathetic towards animals and the plight of
Mm.
animals, and being told from the horse's story was actually kind of it was kind of interesting. But obviously, you don't look too deeply into it because a lot of stuff happens without the horse present, so you don't know how he knows how certain things might have happened. But
The film is
it's like that's cool.
partially told from the horse's perspective.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's yeah, broad strokes. I really liked it. Yeah, it was quite impressive to be honest.
Yeah, to be honest, this is probably my favorite film of his that I've watched so far, up to this point. And some of them weren't completed films. Some of them, are much smaller undertakings. But like this had, like I thought that the idea of telling a story through a horse's perspective was kind of revolutionary for 1925. Like obviously
Absolutely.
we have today with sound, you could just have voiceover and them talking over it. But like this was an
Mm,
interesting idea. I appreciated the approach that they took with it. It had a surprisingly emotional story of like this man who
yeah,
bet it all on the line, lost it all. His wife leaves him for a richer man. And then
yeah,
him trying to keep this relationship with his daughter, the story of this horse over time, and that big like comeback kind of story. And I was just really impressed by the camera work. There's certainly some really good close-up shots
mm,
and like mid-range shots that like, wow, I saw that in the Searchers. It's kind of like you see some of that
yeah.
early John Ford coming through and shot the action well. Just 2 films ago, he was shooting riverboat races. Now he's filming horse races. So it's
Right.
he he has a good eye to be able to capture action because the film felt like I was like watching a race on some level, and it was pretty thrilling at moments.
Yeah,
What are
yeah.
some of the things that really stood out to you as like positives that you really liked about the film?
Well, yeah. Again, just mirroring what you're saying about the actual story, like it was actually quite engaging. Like you do feel for that guy. He's lost everything. He puts all his money in, and the horse injures itself, which I honestly didn't see coming. I just thought it's going to be one of those feel good. It's going to win, and
Yeah.
it's going to come around the corner on a home band and just take it over. But yeah, it injured itself, and then it has to sire its own progeny. And yeah, and then the guy goes off, and yeah, like you said, his wife is a bit unscrupulous, and she just goes with the next guy pretty
Yes.
instantly, who she was kind of always obviously maybe having an affair with anyway, which was alluded to. And then
She
the
wasn't
ending
great.
of that, no, the ending of that where he's lost all his money because he bet against
It's just
the
so
man. She just walks off straight away. She's like, well, she's she's a gold digger, obviously.
Just
Um,
consistent. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, overall, so obviously a few months ago when we were talking about what films we could talk about, and this is the one I chose because honestly, when I read the synopsis, it was like, well, I just watched EO maybe the week before, like last
mm,
year's Polish film EO, and I was like,
yeah,
yeah, that actually sounds interesting because it's told from EO's from the donkey's perspective. This is on the hook. Like, okay, let's just see what that's like. So, um, yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there as I tend to do, but overall, super engaging and really surprised me because I'm not sure I've watched too many films from the 20s, maybe some Chaplin or some Buster Keaton, but
mm,
Um, I was amazed they were doing it that good back then, honestly.
it's shocking to watch certain films and realize like this is pretty revolutionary for early on in cinema.
Mm,
Seeing like
absolutely.
early Fritz Lang films, or like you mentioned, both Chaplin and Buster Keaton, or like throw a bone to Nick Cage, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Like those kinds of films, it's like some of them really stood out. And to be honest, I didn't have high expectations for a ton of these early John Ford films, and like my expectations, like, well, he really didn't hit it until the 30s. You had Stagecoach and stuff like that, but like he's putting out some good films. You see that early John Ford kind of hints. Like the story, I feel like is, it's pretty straightforward. It is a little takes a little bit darker turn than potentially expected. It does have like a true
Hmm.
second act. Like they certainly get knocked down and have to come back around. Um, I do want to mention because, like, it's an early film, and in terms of depictions of people, I was pleasantly surprised that there were actual black actors in this movie and not people with blackface on.
Yeah, yeah,
So
no, yeah.
it's just like,
But
thank
those
God.
intertitles, I've got to comment that those intertitles on it's kind of racist, right? Like
Well,
it's the
so
way they speak, but I
them
guess
being
it wants
actual
the
black
audience to read
people,
it in their voice, right?
positive. What they said, not great. But like, at
No,
least
or the way they said it, not great. Yeah, yeah,
correct. Yeah, the way they
yeah.
wrote
It
out
was,
those
yeah.
title cards, I'm just like, well,
But
you get one
but there
check.
was some consistency there, though. But there was consistency there with the Italian. Was it the Italian mob guys that the intertitles for them was also, you know, the mob guys. It was also
Which I'm just like,
racist. You would say.
I just
At least it was consistent.
on some level, I wish they were just like a beepity boppity beepity, and it just be like, well, at least it wasn't that. It could have been.
Yeah,
Which, as an
yeah,
Italian American, I'm just like, yep. Well, at least,
yeah,
at least they're consistent. They're mobsters, right? So, like, that's what most of them are in early
yeah.
cinema, and also through like
That's
the '90s. So that didn't change much, but it there's definitely things
no.
of its time, which is fair. But
Yeah.
I do feel like this film at least had a nice, engaging, and emotional story. I did, like I mentioned before, I really did like the father daughter dynamic. And,
Yep.
there's some shots in it that could have simply just been like quick shots, but like you could tell that John Ford and the cinematographer on this, which see if that's available. Let's see. George Schneiderman. You can tell like there's these nice frame shots. He loves doorways, or I guess barn doorways,
Mm,
of people framed in,
hmm.
and they're just great shadow and lighting on people. And that's so important because you could watch like, I hate to pick on the Ant-Man movies, but like they're very drab looking, they're heavily lighted. There's not like a shadow anywhere. It just like looks so
Yeah. Yeah.
sterile. But like there's just
Yeah.
simple shots that like they took the time. It's like when I was watching all of Spielberg films, there's so many shots in ET where there's just natural
Mm.
shadows, and I'm like, see, in a lesser director, this would have been just like sitcom lit.
Lit out. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just adds texture and authenticity to it. So I appreciated that.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. There's a decent amount of authenticity to how all of this film was put together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did have you did have thoughts of back in 1925, like the treatment of animal standards were obviously not what they are today. So you can see there's some dubious editing, especially in the race, but you can also see where some horses were probably really injured. And I've heard some stories where Quentin Tarantino talks how they used to do it, and basically the horses were had their legs broken and had to be killed by just the way they got certain shots. So you kind of think, yeah, it might have been a bit harsh, but yeah, you couldn't. I couldn't help but think about those things because that's I yeah, I actually found myself getting a little bit emotional at certain points because I am, I'm real softy for animals, and when I see certain things for animals, like I really empathize with them a lot. So, um, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not sure if you felt the same.
oh yeah, the moment when the wife was like, shoot the horse, I'm just like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
I'm like, how about
yeah,
I take you outside and
exactly. Yeah,
instead?
what a bitch. So her character development, her character was great because she was the villain of the movie, pretty much. Like,
She like from her actions and also the looks on this actress's face.
yeah,
She
yeah,
was so good at just being like,
yeah,
just like she had just that face the whole entire movie, and she never looked happy. She never acted in a good way or a sympathetic way, and like we talked enough already, it's just like she was a great person, and she worked for the film. Yeah,
no, not at all.
she's like there's no nuance to the character, but needed some kind of bad person
No,
to throw into the and the whole trying to rescue the horse thing and the shenanigans slapstick like running around with those
yeah,
like the trash runner guys and stuff like that. So there's certainly emotional moments like that whole sequence with like them trying to shoot the horse, and just there's a lot of emotion that
mm.
carried into that scene, and like the guy who took care of the horse and his family and stuff like that, and the weight that was putting on him. I think that was probably one of
Yep,
besides like the racing scenes, I think that was probably like the best scene in the film where it just really delivered an emotional impact.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. The ending itself when he gets, he's back with his daughter also like, yeah, that was a nice touch. No, it was actually a really good ending overall. It's actually just I don't know. No, I have thought about it, but it's just actually quite. The more we talk about it, it's actually quite an impressive film, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can get over the first 5 minutes of being a different side of, I mean, I would absolutely recommend for people to see it, but as long as you can get over that first 5 minutes of it being truly silent and literally having zero sound at all, yeah, you'll absolutely enjoy it. It's really worth watching.
Throw on some like folk music or something in the background and just go to town.
Yeah,
Be your own soundtrack. But yeah, it's
put
a
on some,
it's a nice little film. It's a good like 70 minutes. So it's a feature. It's a full
yep,
length film.
yep,
And it makes me excited to see more because like there's some John Ford films I love and I've seen plenty of times. The Searchers
yep,
is one of my top 25 favorite movies. Definitely the most complex and interesting John Wayne has ever been in a movie. And it's one of those things where it's just like you see I'm continuing to see week to week the John Ford in there. And it's going to be interesting seeing him really evolve into John Ford and getting into some of his films
yeah,
that are a little bit more well known and, hitting the 30s. And then, his time in World War II, making a whole bunch of just like war film, like actual war footage films and stuff like that. So there'll be some interesting things on the horizon. But Adam, do you have any last minute thoughts about Kentucky Pride?
Nothing last minute, but just want to say that this is actually only my second John Ford film that I've watched. The other is The Searchers,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I actually wrote an article for SiftPop. which we'll probably speak about a bit later. I'm not sure. But yeah, I guess it's made me more interested in wanting to look into his filmography a little bit more for sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
I have to maybe join you on some more recordings in the future.
I have like 40 more movies unclaimed, so there you go.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I'll send you the link, or we could
Yeah,
even
yeah,
just,
okay.
do our thing every like 3 months or so. We'll see what's coming
Yeah,
up in
yeah,
November.
absolutely.
Um, but we had some recommendations for you. You had a couple of TV shows that you wanted to throw people's way.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'll speak about Good Omens season two. It's dropped on Amazon. I finished that yesterday, and it's just as good as the first season. It's just quirky, fun, quaint. It's worth watching just to see Michael Sheen and David Tennant just bounce
Mm.
off each other. They are superb, and I really want to see them. If I was a producer, if I or head of the studio, I'd be absolutely signing them on to do some type of franchise deal with buddy cop movies or something that just has them together, like they used to do with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. Just films of that nature. Have them together. It'll be just phenomenal to see. And John Hamm, he's also in this. If you like John Hamm, and I do, he's actually quite good in this. Like he's always he's a bit confusing. John Hamm for me. Seems a bit one note, but he's actually not. He's actually got a bit of range, and he shows it a bit more in this Good Omens because he's. I won't spoil it, but he does. Just the way his character is in this series. But overall, it's a great show. It's a really good production values. It looks great. It's just it's funny. It's romantic. It's got a lot going for it. It's got a bit of everything, and it's only 6 episodes, around 40 to 50 minutes long. So absolutely worth checking out. The second show I wanted to talk about was a show that I don't think a lot of people see, but Miracle Workers.
Yep.
Really underrated, really underseen. Season four is happening at the moment. Um, Daniel Radcliffe is awesome. He's has an Australian girl in there, Geraldine Viswanathan, I think is how you pronounce his surname. But you'll recognise her. She's in a lot of stuff, and she's in
Yeah.
a lot more stuff coming up. And she's awesome. I really like her. And Steve Buscemi, who everyone knows, is that funny looking fella. Uh, it's just every series is an anthology series, so it's all about different things. Very smart, like another one of those things where it's sneakily funny. Like you like a lot of throwaway lines that you probably don't catch the first time. Just a really cool, fun show. An easy watch as well.
Yeah, in the Good Omens, I watched the first season, really loved it, especially that one episode that like it's Michael Sheen and David Tennant for like almost the whole entire episode, which love that and all their history and everything. That was such a great
Mm.
episode. Looking forward to checking out the second season. And I've been high on Miracle Worker since the first season of like Steve Buscemi as God and um Daniel Radcliffe and Geraldine Viswanathan as like these bureaucrats in heaven trying to save Earth and stuff like that. I really enjoyed this show, and
Yeah, yeah,
seasons like Mad Max esque, and I'm just like, yes, I can't wait
yeah,
to
yeah,
watch
yeah.
this.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I thought you'd like that.
Well, and I actually got to interview her once for like it was like a 10-15 minute
Oh,
interview.
really?
Mm-hmm. She's very nice.
Oh, nice.
And she's really funny. I really enjoy her and things. She's in
That's
Ethan
cool.
Cohen's new Drive Away
Yeah.
Dogs that just got pushed back to February.
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, I was so
And
ready
she's
for it.
also in new Apple TV.
I was so ready for
She's
it
also in
next
the.
month. And I'm
Oh,
like,
it looks cool though, doesn't it?
so we'll just have to wait longer. But I'm a big fan of hers. And Daniel
Mm.
Radcliffe kills it in this
Oh,
show.
he's amazing. I loved it. He's quickly become one of my favorite actors, Redcliffe. Like he's so great, and I just love him for the choices he makes in what he makes. It's amazing.
He does all the weirdest stuff, complex roles and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like, he did Swiss Army Man. Like he was a farting corpse. So like
yeah,
he has
and
no
Guns
shame in
Akimbo, and
doing whatever role, which is pretty awesome.
no, yep,
I have some recommendations. So new film that I watched. This is real fresh. Saw this today. Is The Beasts. This is a French film. Takes place in Spain, which it's about a middle-aged French couple who moved to Spain, small village, by a farm, and they're not very welcomed by the locals in certain ways. It has Straw Dogs kind of feel for like the first half of the film of like what is like is this going to go some places, and it goes some places. And the second half of this film really is like the first half is like the tension, and the second half is like the ramifications, the consequences, and the fallout of all of this tension. I thought it was really well done, really well acted. The husband is the farmer from the beginning of Inglorious Bastards, like that actor who acts
Okay.
against Christoph Waltz. He most recently was just in Beau is Afraid.
Right.
Yeah, and I,
Okay.
I jokingly called him the French Russell Crowe right
Oh,
now.
yes.
They're a couple of big bearded boys right now, and like it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a really well done, very tense and emotional film that like there's moments where I was like white knuckling in the theater literally with the one other random guy that
Oh,
was in the
wow.
theater with me today because it was two people in the whole theater as I was watching this movie. But definitely would recommend it. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, so it's a bit of an investment, but I thought it was certainly worth it. I just watched Melancholia for the first time. I'm going to be talking about
Oh,
that on
yes.
Rowan the Wasteland with Rowan. Oh, you are in for an adventure every time you put on a Lars von Trier film, and this is such a
Yeah.
beautiful film, and boy, is it a
Mm.
challenging watch because depression,
Yep.
and it really delivers that in such a big way, and it's like Kirsten Dunst, great. It has such an interesting
Hmm.
cast, like Alexander Skarsgård's in it, Charlotte Rambling. You have even like Charlotte Gainsbourg, Kiefer Sutherland, John Hurt. It just there's such a
Yes.
big
Yeah.
cast in this movie, and it really is in like a couple of pieces, but it's a hard watch, but I think it was at least worth
I loved
watching.
Melancholia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my big rewatch, which I was prepping for my Wasteland's Vintage Roadshow podcast about this, is Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. Do I have to give reasons why you would recommend Lord of the Rings? It's the greatest live action fantasy ever. Think that's enough. So, and it's really hard to think that something's going to beat that at some point. It's so hard to make fantasy work, especially in live action. And, it's a fine line between looking really great and looking like LARPing. And some
Yeah.
things like, the Wheel of
Yeah.
Time on Amazon kind of looks like LARPing, which really
Does it?
disappoints
Not
me.
seen that.
It disappoints me. I've read all 15 books and I'm just like, I was afraid of this. But
Wow.
plenty of recommendations for all of you out there. But that's a wrap on Welcome to the Wasteland. Next week, I'll be actually joined by, if I'm not mistaken, yes, my wife Jess, who's going to be joining me for the Shamrock Handicap. A lot of interesting titles that I know nothing about any of these movies, but we'll be tackling that one next week on Welcome to the Wasteland. And Adam, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have you back on again probably in 3 months.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Always awesome. Love talking to you. Cheers.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.